Do you ever feel like your players steamroll every single one of your encounters? Like no matter what you throw at them, they seem to just wipe the floor with it and take 0 damage, and then they go flirt with the blacksmith for 45 minutes. Yeah, that's not because they're too strong. It's probably because you're forgetting something very important. And I want to be clear, this video isn't about nerfing your players. It's not about punishing them. It's about why your game might feel unbalanced and what D&D specifically was actually designed to do that you may not realize. And also, side note, this is specifically for D&D 5e. I need to learn to be more specific when I write, so this is me being specific. You may applaud. Now, with the rise of Critical Role and Dimension 20, amazing shows, by the way, I'm a huge fan, and with lots of other channels and shows popping up just like them, trying to find a spot, right, a place for themselves online and find an audience to do what they love to do, right? Same thing I'm doing, I'm not complaining here. A lot of people are building their campaigns around big emotional moments and heavy narrative arcs, which is awesome. If you know my channel, you know that I love that stuff. I'm a writer, I'm a filmmaker, that is my bread and butter. But you also need to remember that those are shows. They're designed to entertain, built with completely different pacing in mind than the average home game. So let's talk about it. Well, first of all, what's important to note is that D&D is designed for multiple encounters a day. Like not 1, not 2. The game is actually built around the assumption that your party is going to face around 6 to 8 encounters between long rests. Yes, really, that many. And that's because the game was designed around dungeon crawls, like spending multiple sessions, if not dozens, going from one room to another. So it made sense, but we've seen this push towards more narrative-based games, which throws off the balance, and so you as DMs of those games have to learn to pivot. The second thing to really note here is that narrative-heavy campaigns often skip the grind. Narrative-first campaigns where roleplay is king and every arc feels like a Netflix original, they're incredible. Again, huge fan, especially love Dimension 20. They're what a lot of us are striving for, and they're what actual plays have trained us to prioritize. Emotional payoffs, plot twists, big character moments. But when you run games like this, you're also stripping out something the rule set was built around, and that's the grind. In traditional dungeon crawls, players are pushed through gauntlets of combat and obstacles. They slowly lose spell slots, HP, items, energy, and all of that wear and tear is the pressure that makes every single decision that they make matter. But when you're playing a narrative-heavy game, players have these deep conversations, and then they'll have one fight, and then a long rest, and then another big roleplay scene, and then another boss fight, and every combat is a cinematic set piece, and while that feels great on paper, it removes the very friction that keeps the tension alive in the game. Because when there's no attrition, then there's no restraint. Players can cast their biggest spells in every single fight. Marshals don't get to shine as much because casters always have these full gas tanks, and then suddenly every encounter feels easy, and then you think you're doing something wrong. And it's not because your players are too powerful, but it's because the game isn't bleeding them dry like it was designed to. Now, let's talk about something else that we also forget, and that's that resource management is sort of the game's hidden lever, if you will, right? That resource attrition is the real balancing mechanic of 5e. I would argue that combat as well, like actually creating encounters is another part of that, but that's a whole other conversation. It's not hit points, it's not monster stats, it's what the party still has left to spend, and that's their spell slots, their rages, their bardic inspiration, their superiority dice, all of those things that exist in a system where players are supposed to feel the pinch over time. That's the lever. That's the thing that keeps the game tense, and if you're running one encounter per long rest, then that lever is not even going unused, it's just irrelevant. You're giving them too much because 5e was designed so that players start strong and then slowly burn out. I mean, if you think about it, most spellcasters are loaded with options that are powerful if used carefully. But if they can cast Fireball every fight with no consequences, then of course things are going to start to feel unbalanced. You're watching a system that assumes depletion but never gets depleted. And it's not just the casters either. Fighters with Action Surge, Paladins with Lay on Hands, Barbarians with Rage, they're all tuned to survive multiple fights. When they only face one, then that challenge is artificial. And then the last thing I want to cover is how encounter variety matters more than difficulty. So let's say you realize that your players are steamrolling everything and your gut instinct is probably to crank the dial. So you double the HP, you add more actions, you throw in a dragon with maximum damage breath, and that'll shake them up, like once, maybe twice. But the problem is that increasing the difficulty isn't the same as increasing tension. What you're actually doing is just stretching out that fight and making it more and more boring, in my opinion. What really matters is encounter variety, because when every fight is roll initiative, kill the bad guys, then the only way to make it harder is to inflate the numbers. And that doesn't create excitement. It just creates that excessive bloat. And the real tension comes from situational pressure. So these are things like objectives, time limits, moral dilemmas, terrain that changes, enemies that don't fight to the death, so they turn around and run away, and now you have a chase sequence halfway through the fight. Or situations where killing isn't even the winning condition, because maybe it's like a hostage situation, and you know the Thieves Guild doesn't want any bodies or anything like that, so you're not even allowed to kill. Or maybe you remove the ability to kill because you have to take their weapons away because they're going into a high security area where they had to relinquish all of their stuff. Right? So now they can't kill. And so it really becomes about changing their mentality and how they're going to solve specific situations, and what winning conditions look like in their brain starts to change. So one fight might be protecting a wagon that's under siege, and then the next fight is chasing an assassin across rooftops while you're fending off ambushes from his people or whatever. Or you're trying to stop a ritual before the timer hits 0. So these things aren't harder, they're just more tense, and they engage different parts of the party, and they stop your players from falling into autopilot. Now, with all of that said, how do you fix this? How do you fix your players from being overpowered or from not having these things, right? Well, it just requires a mindset shift. You don't need to force your players through 8 exhausting fights in a row just to play 5e correctly, you know? You just need to reintroduce that pressure. You need to create friction between them and their power. So I would say start by sprinkling in smaller, low-stakes encounters. Not everything needs to be a boss fight. Even a pack of wolves, and then a collapsing bridge, and then a cursed zone. All of that is going to eat away at HP over time and burn through their player resources. Again, the point here is to force choices. So maybe the wizard can cast Fireball, but should they? Because they don't know when they're going to get to rest again. And what if there's something worse waiting after that, right? Then they're going to wish they had that Fireball, and that's what you want them thinking. You can also limit rest opportunities, like narratively. Maybe the dungeon's collapsing. Maybe long rest requires safety, right? You know, you can't rest right now. There's too many enemies nearby. Or, you know, in my case, on my table, you need a full 8 hours without interruption. Otherwise, it starts to take a toll. And that's, you know, if the party's being hunted, well, now they don't get a full 8 hours. And that doesn't punish them. It just, again, reframes that tension. It just changes the stakes for them, changes the situation. Now, what's even better is when you can mix in mechanical pressure with that story pressure. So maybe the party has to stop a ritual before dawn, and then suddenly long rest isn't an option because things are moving faster. And now your players are having to play smart instead of playing strong, right? Because now you're squeezing those mechanical fixes. So I guess really ultimately that's the fix. You don't nerf the party, you nerf the predictability of their safety. And in doing that, you make every decision matter again. Because now they're going to constantly be thinking, well, what if I need this later? Or what other ways can I do this? What other ways can I solve X, Y, and Z without using this potion or without using this spell slot that I need? And ultimately, it's okay to love narrative. By doing this or by saying any of this, I'm not saying that you can't love narrative games. I'm just saying remember the system you're using. And if you come out of a session and you feel like they did too well or you're not challenging them enough, then maybe it's because you need to tweak some of the ways that you're setting up your sessions. If you love cinematic, emotional, roleplay heavy campaigns, then good, because I do too. That means, you know, we're two of a kind. If your table thrives on those character arcs and those, you know, those secrets and those tearful moments, that's incredible. But Dungeons and Dragons is a game, and games have rules, so I'm not trying to restrict you, but, you know, creating that tension and the challenge and ultimate satisfaction, it all comes down to sort of a mix between the role-playing and the mechanics. The issue isn't that you're telling a story, it's that you might be building that story on a system that you're not fully using, is really what I'm trying to get down to. So if you want your sessions to feel tense again, if you want your villains to land and your victories to matter, and you just feel like you just don't have a grasp, then maybe, you know, try looking at the framework that you're using for your sessions, and just try to build something that's smarter, design more friction, let your players sweat a little bit. That's about it. That's all for me. So there you go. There's your video for this week. Forge on, my friends. And remember, the other red potion is a poison.